we have our guest Fareed talking about Cardivite. Fareed, tell me the story. What's the latest on Cardiovasc?
Yeah, well, Dr. Bill, as you know, Cardiovasc has many benefits. It's a product developed by my dad, and Dad is actually retired now. He's in BC, living a healthy life, and he developed Cardivite in 1999 as part of his pharmacy practice. And there's a bit of a story behind it. He was approached by the Chelation Society of Alberta, and they were looking for a product to improve circulation and help chelation patients to remineralize and recover from this therapy. And so that's really how Cardivite got started, and it's 7 synergistic ingredients for improving circulation or perfusion and reducing cardiac risk factors.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the story is that we're starting to see people having major reversal of vascular disease, improvement of perfusion of their kidneys and their brain so that they get reduced kidney function, dementia, or early dementia symptoms, congestive heart failure. We see people realizing that the problem with blood pressure, hypertension, is a matter of perfusion. And in fact, it can start fairly early. You can see someone in their 20s, and they're getting elevations of systolic blood pressure because their systems that actually regulate blood pressure are detecting decreased perfusion. And the treatment for that is Cardiovasc. And the problem is, you see, by the time the doctors start treating hypertension, it may be years or even decades of poor perfusion that the body is trying to compensate for this developing early plaque and early signs of vascular thickening and decreased perfusion causing hypoxic organs that can induce autoimmune disease and cancer and other health problems. So a lot of times people don't realize perfusion is the key, and hypertension is only a secondary response to the poor perfusion.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's go through some of the components that are in Cardiovasc and explain to people why they're so important. And I tell people, don't treat just hypertension. I assume that all adults in our culture, because of our diet and our lifestyle and our toxic load, have decreased perfusion, and especially if you have syndrome X. But if you have exercise or stress-induced hypertension, systolic or diastolic, if you've got a decreased what's called capillary Blanch test, and we're looking at technology, in fact, there's the EndoPat and EndoThelix tests. We're going to bring on the technicians. There are doctors now in the United States that have these in their offices or hospitals. They can check your perfusion, which is much more important than checking blood pressure. And if your perfusion, which they use by compressing the blood vessels and looking at the return of temperature or the return of blood flow in the capillary bed, and they actually can graph it out. And if your perfusion is not normal, you're going to have hypoperfusion syndromes. Blood pressure is just one of them. The problem, too, is that some of the drug treatments to lower blood pressure can actually decrease perfusion. So when they found out recently last year, they published that if you overtreat the blood pressures of people over 60, lower than 160 over 90, which is still considered hypertension, you can decrease perfusion to their brain and kidneys and cause them to go into kidney failure and become demented. Or push them into heart failure. And the problem is they don't realize as you decrease perfusion, you can push people into a state where they can't compensate.
Yeah, exactly. So, the thing to note about Cardivite, it's a complete circulatory formula. So it's for the heart, so the pump, and also the pipes, the vessels. And so the main ingredient that we have that helps the heart itself is called hawthorn. Excuse me, got a bit of a cold. We use the leaf and flower extract, and that's contrary to what a lot of people believe, that it's a hawthorn berry that's the active constituent. Not the case. The studies that have been done, and they're credible studies, have all been done on the leaf and flower extract, and we use a hawthorn that's grown in Europe. Again, it's a genus of plant that has been shown to be beneficial in the studies. And we test for an active marker compound called Vitexin, and we make sure it's at a level of 1.8%, which is in every batch of the Cardiovasc product.
What's amazing is when you use these components, you're improving the perfusion of tissues, you're stopping free radicals, you're getting rid of toxins that damage the intimal lining, you're stimulating and improving perfusion, so even stem cell regeneration of the heart muscle. We've had people take Cardiovasc, previously called Cardivite, and taken it after heart attack, as they start and their actual heart muscle regenerates. We've seen it with people that have had decreased perfusion because they have a blocked artery in their leg. And one male in 20 over age 40 has a blocked artery of 90% plus in their at least one leg. They don't realize it unless you do a NEVA arterial and venous study or an arteriogram or ultrasound. And if you start cardiovascular, you're going to get a return. And I have to say this really importantly, do not get knockoffs. Do not get Heart and Body. Do not get Strauss Heart Drops, Extendivite, and all those other knockoffs. They're inferior. They do not have the right component of the plant. They don't have the consistent concentration of the molecules, and they don't have the same formula. And that's very important for people to realize. If these formulas were superior, I would prescribe them.
Yeah, and it's the nuances that you have to consider. For example, there's hawthorn that's grown in Europe. There's hawthorn that's grown in China. You would think they are the same plant, but they aren't. There's slight differences, and so those differences make a whole world of difference when it comes to the active marker compounds that are contained in the plant constituents. And that's really what you have to look for. Is you have to look for the marker compounds, and we test for those in every batch.
Right. Now the effects that we see when people take the cardiovasc, it's pretty dramatic. We see people that immediately notice their blood pressure dropping. We need it, and we also combine this with other nutraceuticals such as BioLVR to maintain their levels. We combine it with things like Copper Regenamax, which I've now added to the cardiovascular protocol, along with Vitamineral Max Minerals Plus to maintain their level of tetrahydrobiopterin, Superfolate, Pyromethyl B12, and Simethyl. The use of essential oils, Omega Supreme Krill, and Omega Cod Liver Liquid, magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate, Vascucare carnitine, and the use of CoQ10, ubiquinol, and CoQ10. But the most important of this whole process for supporting circulation and supporting your vascular peristaltic spasm that actually moves the blood around your body is cardiovasc. And I tell people to tighten up the dosage until it works. For example, a lot of people think, well, one size fits all, 2 capsules or 15 or 30 drops three times a day for a male. I personally take 4 capsules twice a day because it's like a BID dosage I find easier to comply with. But instead of taking 6 capsules a day, I'm taking an equivalent of 8. And that's what I need for my system. And some people will, if they're tiny female, may only need 1 capsule 3 times a day or 15 drops. But the way you can tell is you can tell if your perfusion is improved. And the best test for that, by the way, is a QRMA. It actually measures your perfusion, bioplasmatic body, and your rheologic thickness of your blood, etc. So it'll actually tell you even more accurately than the blood test like the C-reactive protein and Pi1. So the QRMA test is amazing. You can do the test yourself daily or weekly, and once you have the machine, it doesn't have to pay for additional testing. It'll tell you in 1 minute. These other tests, I want to get a kind of a mobile version of the endopat and endothelix to see a kind of concrete Western-style test that'll actually show you perfusion, because people chasing their blood pressure don't realize they're chasing a multiple factor controlled compensation for perfusion that often happens years after the process of dysfunction is present. That's why, understanding that cardiovascular isn't just for hypertensives. It's for any individual that might have a first-degree relative that's diabetic or has hypertension or had a history of stroke in the family, or any evidence that there's decreased perfusion, which unfortunately doesn't have symptoms for years before you have problems. And hypertension is just a symptom of the body eventually getting it and realizing that the heart has to pump because it's so bad. The heart's trying to push blood through the circulatory system, and if your heart alone was pumping the blood, you could never provide a circulation just with your heart. It has to have peristaltic waves and nitric oxide released from your capillary bed for you to have circulation. All that's proven. I have the equations for non-Newtonian fluid dynamics. I have all the research studies and papers on it from PubMed, National Library of Medicine. Any cardiologist or any doctor out there who challenges me, I have tons of papers. We have, of course, call line 800-259-5791. You can call in any health, wellness, spiritual, geopolitical question or comment. You're welcome to call in. And what I want to talk about is different things we have available. One of the most powerful nutraceuticals is curcumin. We have the curcumin cream, which I use, of course, when I get my deep tissue massage every Wednesday morning before the show. We have the We have Jay. Jay, welcome back to the program. Let's talk about Silver 100. A lot of people are not aware that not only major pathogens like Helicobacter pylori causing stomach ulcers, or we call stealth viruses, some of them they've received in vaccines when they had as a child that can cause dementia, or the presence of nanobacteria that when people can brush their teeth with Silver 100s, they knock only the 80% of the bacteria in your mouth that can infect your artery walls or other tissues and compartments of your body, including your appendix, or cause general sepsis, actually originates in your mouth. And by simply taking things like brushing your teeth with Silver 100, taking Silver 100 nasal spray or orally, which I do with my daughter every time when she goes to bed, she says, "Silver first, Daddy," and I give her a silver before she gets tucked in and goes to bed. It's a really important step, and people should realize this is cellular and tissue hygiene that's going to reduce a whole range of illnesses from autoimmune disease to joint inflammation to cancer and sinus infections to periodontal illness. It's a really important, what I call hygiene step, to use Silver 100 literally in every body compartment.
You know, it's really remarkable. There, obviously, most people are familiar with silver for killing germs, and we have reports that are astonishing in the volume and the frequency, the percentage overall, and how these reports pertain to everything from very normal, common, mild, everyday conditions to severe to very life-threatening. And you know very well the kind of results that the Silver 100 incurs in that regard. And at the same time, we're talking something that is not just harmless and non-toxic to the body and doesn't create super germs like antibiotics do, but that encourages the creation of dedifferentiated stem cells and therefore makes tissue grow back, makes skin grow back at a rate that is, one doctor said, it's in his observations in his practice, it's roughly about 5 times the rate that the medical textbooks say is possible. And I just had a phone call yesterday from a woman. She's in the middle of introducing people to invest in our company. We only allow investors who care that we can help people because that's how this company even started. I used to have the same attorney and accountant as Stephen Jobs of Apple, and I left high tech because of my passion in natural healing. And, you know, Silver 100 is the result of 10 years and $1 million in development. And it is the efficient delivery of the bioactive form of silver, period. And so this woman is on the phone with me yesterday telling me about this sizable, nasty wound that she had, and instead of going to the store and buying Neosporin and whatever would typically be used, she used the Silver 100, and she said to watch that grow back and heal and just be like it was never there, it's like, and people talk this way, it's like watching time-lapse photography or a science fiction movie. And this is the nature of ionic silver. It is the future of antimicrobial medicine, and it is something that one doctor said, we observe all these results, and yet we're just beginning to start to understand how synergistic it is with the natural processes of the body and how it's doing all it's doing to help the body do what it does. And by the way, in all cases, it's the body that's killing germs, and it's the body that's regenerating tissue. We're just giving it, we're giving it back a natural element that has been dramatically depleted from the average American's diet and something that is just so friendly to the body. And you know, I mean, the results you've seen after years and thousands of bottles, I mean, what is your experience with it?
What I see basically is that when people are using Silver 100, going head to toe, if they've got, let's say, tinea capitis, which is a fungal infection on their scalp, it disappears. See people with acne, they spray their skin after they put their, their curcumin cream to reduce inflammation. Their acne goes away. We see it after people get burns. They put Silver 100, and interestingly, it'll assist with the curcumin cream to turn off the burn and stimulate the skin to heal if you've got an abrasion or an injury. Sinus infections, allergies. We have people with seasonal allergies or asthma. They start taking Silver 100 as an inhalation. Instead of a rescue inhaler, they're using Silver 100. And what interestingly happens, they don't need their anti-allergy medication or their rescue inhalers anymore. Their asthma and their sinus seasonal allergies go away. Because I think they're getting rid of the stealth pathogens that are present that are causing the underlying inflammatory reaction that makes the sinuses prone to inflammation and the asthma and the bronchial spasm and bronchial inflammation go away. Down the GI tract, we see people with dysbiosis. And they can do the test at CDSA-2 test at Genova Metametrics lab, and they start taking Silver 100 in their diet by taking sprays during the day, 2 or 3 times, 4 times a day, and they find their dysbiosis settles, whether it's acid reflux, ulcers, or proctocolitis, inflammation even of the lower bowel. We see with people that have herpes infections, they use it as a douche to stop the recurrence of herpes viruses or even to change the abnormal in situ changes of their cervix from cervical cancer or precancer. We see people that have chronic infections that recur or psoriasis. They treat it over the areas of psoriasis because, remember, it's a local allergic reaction to the organisms that are present in the mouthpieces of the dermacentor mite that triggers off psoriasis, and we see psoriasis settle. So literally, there's no end to it. We even see people with cancer. We have to say, what is cancer? Cancer is an infection triggered off by the presence of stealth pathogens in a low redox state. And when you get rid of the pathogen, again, it's one of the 3 biggies. We use Nutridyne, Allicin-Med, and Silver 100. Silver 100 kills the pathogens. So the underlying conditions that promote gene changes that cause cancer and autoimmune disease are shut off. So I just think it's something that everybody, not just a person selectively here and there, whether you're traveling so you don't want to pick up a bug, whether you don't want to get a food poisoning, which happens on average 6 times a year to the average American, whether they're exposed to a toxin or an actual bacterium or virus, like Norwalk virus, I just think it's something that should be considered daily hygiene.
Daily hygiene, and at the very, very first sign of an indication of anything, you blast it with the Silver 100, and 9 times out of 10, you'll forget to use it an hour later the second time because that condition is gone. And I mean, there's just such a broad range of it should always be available, and people that once they see it work, they will not be without it. I want to point out for people that are listening that are appreciating the potential benefits that are still confused about the difference of different kinds of silver. There's a very basic bottom line reality here. The only active ingredient in any silver product is the silver ions, period. And in colloidal silver, it's mostly inert, or meaning it's just atoms of metal like your jewelry, or it's silver ions that are married to oxide in a silver oxide form that is not soluble in the body and is almost completely excreted before anything useful gets released. Silver 100, the result of $1 million and 10 years in development. When we announced it, the head of technology investing for Morgan Stanley, who created Microsoft, Dell, AOL, and Amazon by
on early, he's going to be scheduled for hour number 3. So our board op, John, can try to get Professor. I want to talk about some of the principles behind the Nutrimed approach to wellness. All of the compartments and tissues in your body basically have molecules that are either in has more electrons or less electrons, so they're in a positively charged state. That situation is really interesting because a positively charged state means that you have molecules where there's electrons moving from a state of higher energy to lower energy. That creates what's called a circuit. A circuit actually is related to a frequency, which means there's an amount of charge buildup and released. And the body, in a sense, is what's called a bioplasmatic body, which means movement of electrons and movement of information determines the turning on and off of genes and the regulation of enzymes. So, Professor McKenney, you're there. And I was just talking about the bioplasmatic body, and it ties in with not only the bioplasmatic body in the physical sense, but also the bioplasmatic body of space. In fact, you made one of the first analogies you mentioned on the program yesterday, your theories which you proposed and gave in Los Alamos and elsewhere, that comets act like the discharge tubes in an X-ray machine generating X-rays, which you predicted, and also cause the frequency shift as they pass. For example, planets like Jupiter, you predicted that as well, which, of course, the regular scientists don't want to accede to. Well, I was talking about the physical body, and I want to kind of get into this explain my theories. When I first did work in rheumatology, I discovered that people who had disease damaging, say, the right knee and, say, the right hand, but the left hand and the left knee may have been spared, but they have an antibody attacking the joints, and you say, well, if there's only an antibody-associated disease and activated T cells that are actually attacking the joint, why is in a sense the physical electrical or electrophysiological properties permissive to cause the illness. And this also ties in with astrophysical principles, because the principles that are, in a sense, fractal in terms of human beings and biological systems like weather systems and continents are all basically the same principle. When I look at a QRMA test, which is I strongly recommend if people really want to know what's going on with their health, they get a quantum resonant magnetic analysis machine. And if they want to get more advanced, and I just got the updates for the software for the Bioplasm Expert and Pro, and I recommend the Bioplasm Expert. These are dramatic machines that look at the bioplasmatic body. Now, you can do functional medical tests, but to be honest with you, the biophysical body changes occur long before you can even see physiological abnormalities on the living pathology tests like organic acids and metabolites. They will follow, and I'll often agree with them, but you'll see it. For example, on my tests, I was removing all the mercury, which of course is knocking out copper, and my copper levels were low. That was my only mineral that was low. Everything else was in the good range. So what we do is we can customize your nutraceutical needs. Well, the same thing goes on with our planet. What the planetary people are doing in terms of geoengineering the climate, and I had a talk with Ding Wigington, who was having a big conference. And I know you had some comments about this, Professor, so I want to bring this forward because one of the things that I talked about this a few weeks ago was John B. Wells, and he said, well, you know, John is a very good interviewer, and he's got a slow drawl and a very deep voice and very easy to listen to. He says, one of the things that I do is I don't ambush my guests. And I had to laugh, and I said, well, one of the things I do, that's my forte, is I do ambush my guests. If they say something that's going to harm the public or put people into a state of stupidity or ignorance, because we have to treat ignorance with a state of violence, and we have to treat people with respect and love. And, Professor, I think this is one of your watchwords. You've always dealt with what you call the artifice of Tier 2 science pretending it is the only source of knowledge and attacking your theories. And these principles are really important because society is not going to survive its own ignorance, is it? I think we have Professor McCanny patched in, so I think he's there. Professor McCanny, are you there? Hello, Professor. Okay. Somehow he's not registering either, so we're getting lots of attacks. I guess maybe they don't want Professor McCanny on the show again. So we had a pretty dramatic program yesterday for about an hour and a half. So we'll keep trying. So here's the principles. I recommend if someone wants to get well, the first thing to do is do not get supplements from anywhere else other than Nutrimedical, because I know what our supplements do and I can quantitate them. Most other supplements are not. They're biologically final converted form. They're not biologically active. They're in inferior forms. For example, when I spoke to my dentist the other day, he said he was trying a sort of form of magnesium, but the magnesium was causing lots of gas. Well, that fact is, unless you have the high-quality forms like magnesium glycinate malate and magnesium taurate, or for kidney stones and gallstones to prevent it, magnesium potassium citrate, you're not going to do well. You're going to have gas or bowel problems. And you're not going to increase brain concentrations unless you use our combination like Brain Mag, which is magnesium L-threonate, along with magnesium glycinate malate. So, principle number one, don't go elsewhere. Principle number two, your bioplasmatic body determines things first, which is why QRMA and Bioplasm Expert are the next level tests to do, not blood, urine, or stool tests. Now, if you want corroboration, these are expensive to do corroboration tests, and they're only a one-time shot, whereas once you have a Bioplasm Expert, or what I recommend first is a QRMA, which is easy to do. The Bioplasm Expert, if you do the full analysis, it will take you about an hour and a half to 2 hours, actually connected to the hydrophones, and you'll actually see on the screen scanning every organ right down to your DNA and RNA. It's amazing. But the first test I recommend is a QRMA, because it does 35 panels of tests in 1 minute. It will tell you from month to month if your organ systems are working, your lipid levels are normal, every organ system, immune system is functioning, what your vitamin and mineral levels are. It basically tells you everything. In fact, I got a call 2 days ago from a fitness center down in the Grand Cayman Islands, and they want to get a machine so they can tell people if they're in their fitness, we call their compensation window. Now, I tell them a third of the tests are obvious to anybody. You just look at them, and a third of them will just tell you if you're normal or abnormal. And what it does is it tells you what your body needs are, or if you've got toxic heavy metals, if they're evident to your biological systems. Now, sometimes to push those heavy metals out, you have to raise the redox of the tissues by infrared sauna, or the use of pulse magnetic field, or detox with DMPS intravenously, or DMSA, and our Max. In fact, I told my dentist, Dr. Curbs, he's going to go for the PAC red cell test at Genova at Metametrics Lab through directlabs.com. But after he takes the Max, which I gave him as a gift the other day, one bottle, he'll get the rest out by ordering it through us. And he'll take the Max, so he'll start to push the heavy metals out, because he gets even though he's using extreme care with dealing with mercury, there must be some exposure. So the first thing, you have to take proper oral chelation to pull out the minerals, because they may not show up on a hair analysis or even a blood test, and you can end up with a false negative test telling you things are okay. Now, so the first step is you must look at the bioplasmatic body. You can mine information out of basic blood tests that average doctors look at, but most doctors don't know how to do it because they don't know enough biochemistry. Then the next level is we call functional medicine tests. That includes things like basically organic acids, metabolites, 23andMe and Prometheus gene analysis, hair analysis, CDSA stool analysis, DNA probes, cultures, parasite analysis, microscopic evaluation, etc. And this whole range of tests we call functional medicine looks at the body. The thing is, it's quite expensive. If you do a cardio-ion panel, it's going to cost you, I think, around, you get a discount because you're buying it directly. It'll cost you probably, I think, around $1,200-$1,400. It would ordinarily cost about $2,500, and they will send you the kit. So, number one, send me your wellness history and your questions by email or call if you're a customer. Do bioplasmatic tests with a QRMA. We'll customize your protocol. If you want to get real advanced, get a bioplasma expert. Then we can do functional medicine testing to see if you're in the zone of compensation. So long before you have symptoms or illness, we'll tell you what's wrong. When we come back, we'll try to connect with Professor McCanny early.
Hi, this is Walt Augustinowitz. I'm
trying at the top of the hour. So I want to go over some of the latest news. It talks about all the myths about healthcare. Firstly, the myth is that you have a receptor or particular illness is caused by deficiency of a toxic drug. That myth is pushed by salesmen with a white coat called MDs, DOs, DCs, etc. They're even pushing single natural molecules, when in fact there's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's silver bullets. The biggest problem is the drug companies that control the medical system, MDs and DOs, and they have been turning them into salespeople. And of course the same thing goes on with the vaccine companies, supporting medical schools and state licensing authorities and the people they put in power to make sure they force vaccines. In fact, if you join organizations like Kaiser Permanente, they're extremely aggressive to push vaccines, no matter what procedure they have. And I can remember when I've seen my doctor, which is only a few times, it's amazing how they keep asking the same questions. Have you had vaccines? Have you this? Have you that? I'm thinking, I already denied and don't want them. Stop asking me these questions. And when you raise the issues that the vaccines are dangerous, you can tell the people that are pushing them have no knowledge, have not read even the product inserts on the vaccines, and are not really interested in that. So one of the other things is people should realize a lot of the drugs doctors give, for example, like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, they're basically trading one problem for another. For example, when you use acid-blocking drugs to calm the heartburn, it actually is now, they've got proof is causing death and heart attacks. That means like histamine 2 blockers and proton pump inhibitors. We have, of course, a latest article I posted up on my mass email we sent the other day, how the microbiome destroyed the ego, vaccine policy, and patriarchy. And we have, I call the medriarchy, which is the medical system acts like their parent. Like Dr. Richard Penn, it says, I know more than all of my doctor colleagues, all of the public, and vaccines are perfectly safe even though we gave $3.4 billion for injured children and parents since 1986 from the vaccine court. The fact is vaccines are not safe and they're becoming more and more unsafe, like Gardasil. We have the same thing going on with Pepsi-Cola basically now getting out of aspartame after years of public media. They're not going to win back customers. They switched over to Splenda, which is a chlorinated optical isomer of sugar that's almost equally as toxic as aspartame, will even cause a recall phenomena. We've had experts on, like Dr. Richard Conard on fluoride, people still want to depend fluoride and say it decreases cavities when it actually damages the enamelocytes. And yes, it may stop a cavity from forming, but it actually damages your brain. It may not cause a cavity in your teeth, but will in your brain. So the real issue is that the total fraud and ignorance of the system, the power control system, basically like the grid. I watched the movie Take Back Your Power, and it showed Josh Del Sol and some people up in the Salt Spring Island off Vancouver Island being interviewed, and the Power Corp guy was moving his hands and waving, "This is not a smart meter," moving around like he was a conductor. And then, of course, they had people right there from the smart meter organization with the special detectors like I have for detecting radiation from the meter, and immediately after it's put in, it immediately started blasting out every so many seconds. Huge bursts of radiation, over 2,000 microwatts per square meter. So these people are bold-faced liars. They do not test the utilities, do not test the safety of these. Smart grid does not save power. It basically is going to turn your Internet of Things, of your appliances, into snooping or things that can actually turn off your dishwasher at certain times of the day or night, so you're not using your dishwasher during, quote, peak power. It's going to start charging for what's called time of use, TOU. And they're already driving prices up like dramatically. So most people that have smart meters are already noticing their bills are double or triple. Plus, they make your entire home a radiation site at 2.44 gigahertz. And the frequency that they're actually communicating, by the way, with these appliances is the same frequency of water, the water molecule. It's actually the harmonic frequency of water, which means it's especially damaging to the hydrogen bonds around your DNA. So it's literally right at the frequency ranges that are particularly cellular disruptive.
Professor McKinney called in. He's faded up if you want to ask for him.
Hey, Professor McKinney, we finally have you back. It's good to hear you.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I don't hear an echo, and I hope you don't hear one, too.
Well, I'll just pretend I'm in the Grand Canyon.
Well, we have a lot of announcements, and I honestly think that besides the usual technical problems, I found out something very interesting. The cable companies, and you probably know about this, when they start adding these two-way services, several years ago they took off the filters to stop and add two-way services for fancy phone systems that they've added, and electronic boxes for two-way internet, etc., for movies and so on, for calling up movies. And what it is, they took off the filters so people could literally, because of that, are able to steal cable. They're also able to put bad signal back down the line, unless they actually are there to catch them while they're doing it. They don't know if they're doing it, and of course, if they put a filter on that individual home, they lose two-way. In other words, they can't do the two-way calling up movies and so on. So basically what cable companies have done, because they're greedy, is they've added technology that makes their internet service very, very poor. And it knocks out Skype, it knocks out because of packet loss, and it particularly knocks out access, which is even more sensitive. And it's because of the greed. So even though they've increased the baud rate, the rate of upload and download, to 100 megabytes or 20 megabytes upload, we have 100 megabytes download, the packet loss is a major problem. Now, why do they do this? Is because all the companies, the power companies and the internet companies, want to invade our privacy in our home. That's why they want to invade our bodies. The fact that we can't control power corporations from irradiating us with toxic radiation, that we can't control our bodies to not be vaccinated against our will with adjuvants and toxins and heavy metals, where the fools will actually lie to us, like Richard Pan, this moron, this idiot doctor who should have his license revoked, and should be in prison for actually trying to force vaccinate the entire California population, which will cause death, disability, and destruction. But again, the same plasma physics principles exist regarding the Earth. And I had a call about 2 weeks ago from Dane Wigington. I know you made some comments about Dane, and I want to open this up. Now, I know there's some points of disagreement, he said, and he was worried about coming on my show because he knows that I will ambush my guests. If they say things that I don't agree with, or I put together an alternative thesis, because I have classified knowledge and I understand the plasma physics before even starting getting involved with this, I had a clear knowledge of exactly what's going on with geoengineering the weather, and I'm probably one of the first on Earth to actually talk about it in technical detail. So what are the areas which you disagree with in Dane and his thesis of either what the globalists are doing or what the science is? What are those areas?
I'm not totally sure. He talks a lot about the global climate manipulation due to chemtrails, and and that's a huge issue. And so I don't know if there's any disagreement there. The one thing I always add is that
I'll totally disagree.
Satellites.
Yeah, I'll totally disagree, and I'll tell you why. Number one, the weather modification is occurring at 73 to 80,000 feet where there's no chemtrails. The chemtrails, when they're seeing out, are basically weather modification by cloud formation. And what they're doing is putting up cloud seeding technology that's changing weather patterns. That's at lower altitudes. The stuff that I know about that's being put up by robotic drones at Buckley and Aurora airports, which are basically robot drones that are flown at 73 to 80,000 feet, are not visible. There's no chemtrails. The chemtrails are at lower altitudes. And so when people are seeing chemtrails, it's no different than cloud seeding or technology to form clouds or not form clouds or block weather systems. But the primary weather modification is occurring in the upper troposphere, and they're using high-energy lasers and plasma interferometry with space-based, not ground-based HARP. So when people start talking about HARP, I have scientists and classified contacts that are watching if, quote, HARP is on, and it's not been on for more than a decade, when these weather modifications are occurring, because it's satellite-based weather modification, high-energy lasers, and plasma interferometry. Now, why that's important is because they told me the very first reason why, and I found it out from these guys directly, it was to block coronal mass ejections from the sun or major gamma bursts and so on that could destroy the upper ionosphere and affect communications and power systems on Earth. And they were particularly concerned about things like gravity waves and other things triggering off tectonic events. So the first reason why they're doing this was actually what I was told, and this is where he disagreed. He thinks that chemtrails are doing it. Firstly, the nanoparticle aluminum and other particles are not being put down at 30 or 40,000 feet because they'd fall within a matter of days.
Are you